Okay. All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. وأفضل الصلاة والتسليم على سيد الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم المصطفى الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا وزدنا علما والحمد لله على كل حال. So inshallah, I know Arif, mashallah, he introduced me. So I'll just talk a little bit more about what I do and, inshallah, what this talk is about. First and foremost, as he said, I am a chaplain at UCLA, Muslim chaplain for IOK at UCLA. I'm also a therapist. So I talk to people about their problems for a living. But my specialization, alhamdulillah, is actually in addictions. All right, is in addictions. One of the reasons why I got into this is because I realized that a lot of our youth were getting caught up in different types of addictions. I'm not talking just about drugs and alcohol. It's not just drugs and alcohol. The number one addiction amongst the youth right now, and I'm just going to be blunt with you, is actually pornography. This is the number one addiction. Okay, and it has long-term implications for our community. All right, because your sons and your daughters are eventually going to get married, and there's going to be problems. Okay, because as we know now, pornography, if somebody has erectile dysfunction from pornography, there's no cure for it. There's no cure. Okay, so I'm speaking to you as a professional, but I'm speaking to you out of compassion for our youth, because our youth, they have no. There's never been a time in history where the youth were confronted with what they are confronted with. There's never been a time in history where you can hold a device in your hand like this, and it shows you everything that contradicts your worldview. It shows you every fitna. It shows you every kufr. It shows you every type of nifaq on this device. This has never happened to humanity before. This is what our children are dealing with. And if we're not smart and we begin to deal with the problems in a very intelligent way, in a very in an excellent way, full of ihsan, the communities will be filled with problems. So, alhamdulillah, I'm thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He allowed me to start this organization, and we have a table outside on the side of the masjid. So the ladies and the men, if you go around, we're right in the middle, right in between where the men go out and where the women go out. And there's some information over there about the organization that we started. It's a behavioral health organization called Lamps of Light Project. And just very quickly before I get into the lecture, there's 4 things that we focus on. Number 1, educational initiatives like this one here, where we go out into the community, we tell the community exactly what's going on and what they need to do about it. Number 2, we have a mentorship program where, like if a parent calls me and they say, listen, I have a child I found a vape machine in his room. I have a child, he's acting out at school. He's getting into the gangs. He's getting in trouble. Some of the people that I hire at our organization are only people, number 1, they've had problems in their life, but they recovered. They're Muslim. They had problems in their life, but they recovered. These are the type of people that we hire. These are people who might have had an addiction before, but then they recovered. And then we pair them up with your children to teach them how to overcome what they're afflicted by. So that's the second thing that we do. We do mentorship. The third thing that we do is professional counseling. I myself am a counselor, and we have 2 other counselors on staff, 1 female and another male. And it's so that we can get every level of help to the community. But the most important thing is that what we specialize in is addictions. So there's two types of addictions. You have chemical addictions, that's very easy, drugs and alcohol. But you have other types of addictions that are internet-based that people don't talk about. All right, at the top of the list, like I said, is pornography. Then there's shopping online, gambling online, social media, gaming. All of these things are internet-based addictions, and our community is being confronted with this, and we don't know how to respond. So inshallah, that's what I would like to talk about a little bit about tonight, inshallah. So this talk, inshallah, is going to be about trauma and spirituality. Right? Trauma and spirituality. And one of the things that we're trying to do as therapists in our community, professional counselors in our community, is what we try to do is we try to take a lens and we put it on the Quran and the Hadith, the Quran and the Sunnah, so that we can solve modern problems using our tradition. So let me give you an example. Most of you have probably heard about the man who killed 99 people. He killed 99 people, right? So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam tells us about this man. And he's talking about, this was before the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said there was a man, he killed 99 people. And he went to his people and asked his people, who is the wisest amongst you? Who's the wisest one that can give me advice about how I deal with this guilt that I feel? So they indicated to him a monk. So he goes to the monk and he tells the monk, I killed 99 people. Is there any hope for me? And then that monk tells him, no. So he kills him too. So now he's killed 100 people. He goes back to his people and he says to his people, who is the wisest amongst us? I want to go to him and I want to ask him about my situation, about my case. So they indicate someone else. And this particular person that he goes to this time has, not only is he a monk, but he has knowledge, right? The first one, he was a monk, but he had no knowledge. The second one was a monk, but he had knowledge. He was a wise counselor. So he goes and he tells the monk, hey, I've killed 100 people. 100 people. Is there any hope for me? So the monk tells him, yes, of course. Who can tell you that there's no hope for you? Who can tell you that? But then he begins to diagnose him. And he says, listen, you come from a bad people. You come from a bad environment. You need to leave your environment. So that's what the man begins to do. So he begins to leave his town. He begins to leave the place where he killed all of those people. And he dies before he reaches his destination. Rasulullah ﷺ tells us, the angels of mercy come for him, and the angels of wrath come for him. And they begin to fight amongst themselves. The angels of wrath, they say, he's ours. We're taking him to Jahannam. We're taking him to the hellfire. He's never done anything good in his life. And the angels of mercy say, no, he belongs to us. Because he was on the path, he was making tawbah. He was on the path of asking Allah for forgiveness. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a third angel in the form of a man to dispute between the other angels. And the solution was, if he's closer to the place where he committed sins, he goes to the angels of wrath. If he's closer to the place where he was going to make tawbah, he goes with the angels of mercy. And because of a miracle, Allah shortened the earth. He was closer to the place where he was going to make tawbah. So the angels of mercy took him. Now, what are some lessons that we can learn from this hadith? Number one, this man was in pain. He was in pain. He was in spiritual and psychological pain. no one goes and asks for help except they are in some type of pain. Now, he's in pain, and his people advise him, yes, go here. Go to this monk here. He goes to the monk, but that monk is like many of us, right? When our youth come to us and they say, Baba, or they say, Ya Imam, or they say, Ya Sheikh, or they say, Ya Ustad, I'm dealing with this. We give them bad advice. We're not patient with them. We are not compassionate with them. And then it causes them to commit more sins. So the monk tells him, no, there's no hope for you. Right? There's no hope. As if Allah is not going to forgive you. Allah's mercy is not wide enough for you. So he kills him too. But he's still in pain. He's still trying to solve the problem. And I know people like this. Wallah al-azim, I know people like this. I know people who have come from places like South Central. They've come from places like, Fifth Ward in Houston. They've come from places like O Block in Chicago. They've come from places like Brownsville in New York City. And they have killed people. But it's because of their environment. Their environment has done that to them. And so the second man that he went to, he's the wise counselor. He has a better understanding of, number one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he also has a better understanding of human nature. And so he's able to give him advice. Good advice. And he tells him, yes, Allah will forgive you. It doesn't matter what you've done. Doesn't matter how many times you've done it. Allah's mercy, wasi'ah. It's so wide that it's bigger than any sin you can commit. It's bigger than any sin. But then he gives him advice. You have to leave your place. You have to leave this place that caused you to commit these sins. So when our youth come to us, we have to be wise enough to understand. And I'm summing this up for you because I'm in all of these spaces. I give the khutbah all over Southern California, sometimes across the country. I've had thousands of hours of speaking to our youth. I speak to the different imams, the asatid, the teachers, the shuyukh, all across the country. And there's a consensus that our youth are suffering. And they're suffering many times because of actions of their caregivers. Their caregivers put them in public school and then say, when you come home, be totally different than what they're teaching you in school. When in reality, they should be saying, no, leave that environment. Go to an all-Muslim environment. And then we tell them, oh, you're going to go to hell. Allah's going to punish you. Allah's not going to like you if you do X, Y, or Z, instead of telling them about the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's many wisdoms that we can get from just this one hadith, So I just wanted to lay that groundwork so that you can understand that we have youth that are in this type of situation. Our youth today are in this exact same type of situation. They're put in environments where they're exposed to every type of sin. And even if they're in their bedroom, they're still exposed to it. And we have to be genius about how we respond to these problems. So the premise of this talk is to talk about how traumatic events can impact the soundness of our deen. Traumatic events can impact the certainty of our faith. How traumatic events can affect our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right? So now let's define terms. Trauma means wound. Wound. But it's not a physical wound. It's an emotional wound. But if you're wise and you understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has described that the human being has two bodies. The human being has the physical body, but the human being also has the spiritual body. And in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us the person who does not take care of his spiritual senses, his spiritual, the things that give him spiritual information. So for example, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, speaking about people who go to the hellfire, and he tells us why. لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا. They have hearts that they don't think with. They're not able to understand with their hearts. This is talking about the spiritual faculty, the psycho-spiritual faculty that we all have. And then he says, وَلَهُمْ أَعْيُنٌ لَا يُبْصِرُونَ بِهَا. They have eyes they can't see with. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not talking about these physical eyes. He's talking about spiritual insight, basira, spiritual insight. وَلَهُمْ آذَانٌ لَا يَسْمَعُونَ بِهَا. And they have ears, but they don't hear with their ears. This is talking about the spiritual hearing. So Allah is indicating that the human being has not only the physical outward appearance, but he has something inward that he has to take care of. Now, what I'm saying to you is that trauma is a psycho-spiritual wound that happens on the inside of a person. And in the same way that if you get a physical cut on your arm and you need to go to the doctor and you need to get stitches and you need care and medicine and penicillin for that wound, I'm telling you that people who have trauma inside, they need the same care. They need the same type of care. They have to go to people, wise counselors, who will be able to walk them through that process of healing that psycho-spiritual wound. Now, how are we affected by trauma? Like, how does trauma show up in our lives? Sometimes it can be outside of ourselves, like natural disasters, earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, things like that. But it can also be physical assaults, right? It can be a physical assault. It can be a sexual assault. You can witness a violent death, someone dying in front of you. I had a client one time who, when he was 15 years old, 15, his brain's not even fully developed yet. And to get into his gang, he had to kill somebody. And the way that they did it was gruesome. They filled up a tire with gasoline, put it over the woman that they were going to kill, and then let it on fire and watch her roll down the street. He didn't start to get help for that until he was in his 30s. You know, but because he couldn't remove the images from his mind, from his imagination, he couldn't remove it. And then after working with him for a couple of years, he was able to stop having nightmares and things like that. That is trauma. That's trauma. Childhood neglect. This is one of the ones we don't speak a lot about as a community. As a community, many times we do not give our children what they need. We don't give them what they need, and then we blame them for not giving them what they need. So it can show up as abuse. You know, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam never hit a child. Never, never. Anas bin Malik tells us that. And remember, Anas bin Malik lived with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for almost 10 years, for over 10 years. And he said Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam never said "uff" to me. And he would not allow his family to say "uff" to me. Now, where is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his treatment of children, and where are we? What do we expose our children to? How do we talk to our children? How do we deal with our children? We place unreasonable expectations. And I'm just being honest with you, because I listen to the children. I listen to the kids. We have about 1,000 Muslim kids on the UCLA campus. But more than that, I go to the masjid, I go to the talks. The parents call me. They call our organization. We have thousands of hours of therapy sessions. And so I'm telling you, like, this is a real problem. And if it's not abuse, sometimes it's just neglect. It's neglect. You know, children need two things that they always need. They need affection, and they need authenticity. they need to be authentic with themselves. So for example, they need affection. And if you're around children, if you have children, you know that part. That's easy. They will come to you and they will seek your attention. They will cry in front of you. They will tell you to pick them up. They want to kiss you. They want to hug you. They need affection. And if they don't get it, it's a type of neglect. It's a type of neglect. Because what they're learning is that the world is not safe. And that will have long-term consequences with every relationship that they have after that. The second thing that they need is authenticity. So many times we want to force children to be other than how they are. So when they're crying, we'll tell them, shut up. When they're fussing, we'll tell them, be quiet. So then they learn that they cannot be themselves. They have to be inauthentic to be safe around you. Sometimes this is what we do to our children. And then when they grow up and they want to be completely away from us, they don't want to be around us, they don't want to talk to us, then we don't know why. Because to be around us means to be inauthentic. People must be authentic. So those are some examples of trauma, how it can show up in our community. Now the impact of trauma, what it does is it constricts your psychological and spiritual functioning. It constricts it. It makes it so that a person has a shame, the way they view themselves is full of shame. They see themselves, as something shameful, something to be ashamed of. I can't live up to the bar, right? It distorts our worldview. You don't feel safe in the world. You don't feel safe around people. I can't tell you how many of our kids have social anxiety, and they don't know why. But it comes from being inside the house. Inside the house, they were not safe. Emotionally, they were not safe emotionally. So when it comes time to go out into the public, they carry that out in the public also. All right? And I'm just giving you this information. I'm trying to speed along. I'm trying to speed up a little bit, right? Trauma, sometimes our children go to school and people find out that his name is Muhammad, or his name is Mustafa, or her name is Khadija, or something like that. And they begin to be picked on. These are this is known as small trauma. Small trauma. They get picked on, especially if they're in a classroom. For example, I heard of one case where a young girl, she was picked on because she was from Afghanistan. And, this was some time ago when there was still a lot of tension. A lot of the American soldiers were going to Afghanistan. And some of the soldiers had children that were in the classroom. So when they realized that she was from Afghanistan, their father was going to fight against her people, she became the focus of their psychological torture. And the parents didn't give that time and consideration. So as she's growing up, she becomes ashamed of her name, Khadija. She becomes ashamed of wearing the hijab. She becomes ashamed of claiming her Afghan heritage because of what happened to her when she was young. This is what we call small trauma. These are the type of things that happen to people. All right? Now, the thing about all of this, the thing about trauma is this. No one's going to escape it. No one's going to grow up all the way through life and not experience some type of trauma. But my argument is this. We live in a time now where we don't have the extended family unit. We don't have the community unit where people can process that trauma. They can get help for those adverse life experiences that they have. Right? Our families are distanced from each other. Many times it's just the mother and the father in the house. And we know statistically by research that one child needs at least 4 caregivers to have a healthy sense of themselves. 4. They need 4 people hugging them, kissing them, telling them everything's going to be okay. No. Be proud of your name, Khadija. Be proud of your name, Muhammad. Be proud of your name, Ahmed. They need at least 4 people doing that all the time. And if they don't, there's going to be some type of anxiety about who they are. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He tells us in the Quran that you're going to go through, you're going to have trauma in this life. Allah tells us that. وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِّنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوءِ وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Allah tells us, no, we're going to try you. We're going to test you with something of fear. Fear. You know, fear is on a spectrum. It's on a spectrum. There's different levels of fear. Anxiety is just a small part of fear. So you can have anxiety all the way on this end, and you can have dread all the way on this end, panic attacks all the way on this end. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling you that you're going to get tested with all of these things. Things that you're afraid of, things that give you anxiety, things that give you irritation. Allah is telling you that whole spectrum, you're going to get tried with it. Khawf, wal-ju', hunger. Ask the people of Philistine about hunger. Ask them. وَنَقْصٍ مِّنَ الْأَمْوَالِ. Allah tells you, you're going to lose money. You're going to lose property. You're going to lose stocks and bonds. You're going to lose cash. It's going to happen. No getting away from it. وَأَنفُسِ. You're going to lose lives. You're going to lose people in your life. And they're going to lose you. That's what Allah, He promises. But then He goes on to say, وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Give glad tidings to those who, despite that, they can be patient. They can be patient. So Allah tells us that you're going to experience hardship. You're going to go through things that's traumatic. But it's up to us to set up the safeguards so that when people experience trauma, they can get help. That's up to us. This is the secret. This is the wisdom of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam telling us that we have to take care of the orphan so they don't experience trauma. We have to take care of the widow, right? We have to take care of the handicapped. We have to take care of the people who, right, they can't make ends meet. The masakin and the fuqara, the poor, or, you know, like people who just, they have a hard time for whatever reason. This is why we've been commanded to do this, to offset that trauma that they experience. That's why. All right? So let me ask you this. Can you think of a time in the life of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam where all of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum experienced trauma? Don't be shy. Who do you think? Yes, okay, I'm going to come to that one. But I'm looking for another one before he passed away. Very good. MashaAllah. Tabarakallah. What's your name? Mustafa. Now, he said during the battle of Uhud, and he's correct, the battle of Uhud. So in a nutshell, when Rasulullah ﷺ was going out on a martial expedition, he was going out to fight against the Meccans and all of their Ahzab, all of their confederates. He told a group of archers, 40 of them, go on that mountain and don't move. No matter what happens, if we're winning, if we're losing, don't move. What happened? They moved. What happened as a result of that? More than 70 companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was killed that day. And they thought that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, some of them thought that he was killed that day. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? And some of them became despondent. You know, despondent, it means they just gave up the fight. These are Sahaba that we're talking about. When they thought that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had passed away, they just was like, whatever. If he's gone, what does it matter? Sallallahu alaihi wasallam. right? That's an effect of trauma. That's an effect. What I want to draw your attention to is this. This is self-inflicted trauma. They were told not to do something, and they did it. So the disaster, they brought it on themselves. All right? They brought it on themselves. Because the reason why I'm saying that is because sometimes your children will do things that they brought on themselves. And it doesn't matter. You still have to be gentle with them. Because that is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam commanded. That is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded in the Quran to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam directly about that. And so you have to understand that there are 70 people in the community that's gone. There are 70 widows, 70 families without husbands. And there's no county office where you can go and apply for general relief or food stamps or something like that. If you don't have people to help you, to take care of you, you're going to have a hard time. You're going to have a very hard time. So that is what that, and like I said, they brought that on themselves. But how did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to deal with them, even though they brought that on themselves? فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ. This verse was revealed about Uhud. It is by the mercy of Allah that you were gentle with them. And then he tells them in the very next verse what would happen if he was not gentle with them. وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. If you were harsh and hard-hearted to them, they would have just fled from around you. Who are we speaking about? We're speaking about people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, رَضِيَ اللَّهُ عَنْهُمْ وَرَضُوا عَنْهُ. They are pleased with Allah, Allah is pleased with them. They have Iman, they have the highest Iman. No one can say they don't have Iman. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if you are harsh and hard with them, they're just going to leave you. They're going to just walk away from you. So we have to ask ourselves, why aren't there more youth in the masjid? How are we dealing with our youth? Why are they running away? Are we being harsh and hard with them? Spiritual bypassing, not really addressing the issues? Is that how we're being? We have to give this some thought. Because we're in a time where people need compassion. People need understanding. People need forgiveness. People need softness, not harshness. I just told you, I started off telling you a man, he killed 99 people. There's nobody in this room that killed 99 people. And Allah forgave them. Whatever your child is doing, you have to learn how to overlook. You have to learn how to know what to pay attention to, what not to pay attention to. Know what to deal with in-house, know what to have a professional deal with. All right? So, when you think of someone who's very strong in their Iman, very strong, uncompromising in their Iman, who do you think about? Who do you think about? No? I heard it. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And after him, like when we think of him, we're like, oh, he's the hero, he's the warrior, nobody messes with him. Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. Yep. Umar ibn al-Khattab. Yes. Umar ibn al-Khattab. He's the one. When you think of Umar ibn al-Khattab, you don't think of trauma. You don't think of that. Who would think of Umar ibn al-Khattab trauma and Umar ibn al-Khattab? Yes, Umar ibn al-Khattab. I mean, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu was the one who, there were many Sahaba when they were making the hijrah to Yathrib, which would eventually become Medina. They were sneaking out of Mecca. They had to hide and sneak out. Umar ibn al-Khattab, he goes to the Kaaba in front of the Quraysh with his sword and his bow and arrow, and he says, I'm getting ready to go to Yathrib. If you want your wives to be widows and you want your children to be orphans, try and stop me. Just try and stop me. But Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam passed away, he could not accept it. And that's trauma. That's trauma. When somebody that you love and you don't have any expectation of them passing away suddenly, it has a traumatic effect on you. So what happened with Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu? What happened? When the man came to him and told him that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away, the first thing that he told him that you're a liar. The second thing that happened was he said, and if you say it again, I'm going to separate your head from your shoulders. Now look at Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu. Completely different response. He comes to the room of his daughter, Aisha radiallahu anha. He sees that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. He kisses Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And then he goes out into the masjid to tell the people. When he goes into the masjid, Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, he's wound up. And he's telling everybody, it's a lie, I don't believe it. And there's Sahaba that's gathered around him. And of course, he's one of the Ashara Mubashirin. He's one of the 10 who was promised paradise. He's one of the ones that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that if there was Nubuwah after him, it would go to Umar. If there was to be a prophet after him, it would be Umar ibn al-Khattab. So people know his weight. He has huge weight in the community. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq comes into the masjid and he tries to tell Umar, no, stop talking. He tries to get him to sit down. And this is very, very interesting to me as a therapist, because this is what has to happen when people have trauma. You must have them sit with the pain to begin to process it. So he's trying to get Umar ibn al-Khattab to sit down. Umar won't sit down. So he walks away from him to the other side of the masjid, and he begins reciting a verse to the other companions, because they realize this is Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. Like he is the best friend of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He is the father-in-law of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was the one mentioned in the Quran as being second in the cave. He also has weight in the community. And he begins to recite the verse, وَمَا مُحَمَّدٌ إِلَّا الرَّسُولُ. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is but a messenger. قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِهِ الرُّسُلُ. Messengers have passed away before him. Umar ibn al-Khattab, when he hears Abu Bakr as-Siddiq saying that, he comes over to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and he tells us in his own words, when I heard Abu Bakr as-Siddiq saying that, it was as if it was the first time I heard that verse. And my legs ceased to hold me up. He passed out. That's a traumatic response. That's a traumatic response. So no one should say, and I can give you more examples than that. I can go on and on and on, but they'll kick me off of the minbar, right? I have maybe 10 minutes. I'll give you a few more examples. Aisha radiallahu anha, in several narrations, tells us that Fatima Zahra, the daughter of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, after he passed away, she stopped smiling. She said, I never saw Fatima Zahra radiallahu anha smile with a full smile after Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. It was too painful. That's trauma. That's a trauma response. Bilal ibn al-Rabah stopped calling the adhan in Medina. And he left and went to Syria. Why? Because in his own words, it was too painful to remember the days when Rasulullah ﷺ was amongst them, when he would call the adhan. And he didn't come back to Medina until he had the dream that Rasulullah ﷺ came to him in a dream and said, Ya Bilal, why haven't you visited me? He got on his horse that day and he went to Medina to visit the grave of Rasulullah ﷺ. And when he got there, people saw him, they wanted him to call the adhan. Please, Bilal, call the adhan. He refused. But he finally did it. And the tradition tells us there was not one dry eye in the city of Medina when he called the adhan. That's pain, y'all. That's pain. Why am I saying this to you? Because sometimes our youth will have hard experiences, either in their homes, at school, on the university, and they'll seek out help. They'll go to the imam first. We're Muslims. The first place we think of comfort and care is the masjid. So we go to the masjid. We want to speak to the imam. We want to speak to the sheikh, right? And then the sheikh will say something like, you need to pray more. It's true. We need to pray more. We all need to pray more. But many times, people need more than that to deal with their trauma. You see, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and the rest of the community was able to come together to deal with the passing away of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So they were able to overcome it and move past it. We have people in our community who experience trauma, they experience pain. There's no one there to help them to move past it. They give them cheap interventions. They're like the one in the hadith that Rasulullah ﷺ passed away. The man who killed 99 people. And he goes to the first guy, and the first guy gives him bad advice. Gives him bad advice. This person is in pain. He needs the pain addressed. Right? Of course, there's a spiritual solution. But many times people need help, right? Before you give them the spiritual solution. All right? So I know I only have a few minutes left. But I'll begin to end with this. In the same way that when you have a physical wound, if someone cuts your arm deep with a knife, it needs attention and care. A physical wound, it needs you to go to the doctor, it needs to be cleaned, it needs stitches, it needs, medicine, it needs antibacterial ointment, bandages to be cleaned over and over again until it heals. Psychological wounds are the same. And if you don't get that help, it will get infected. And it will keep demanding attention. It will keep demanding attention until you deal with it. Psychological pain is the same way. If you don't deal with it, it will keep coming back. It will keep coming back to haunt you over and over and over again until you deal with it. Even to the extent that it shows up in your dreams. Right? Ibn Sirin, rahimahullah, he tells us that dreams have three sources of inspiration. The first one is the nafs. The self will tell you what it wants. It will tell you what it needs. So if you're very, very hungry, sometimes in Ramadan you take a nap, you're going to dream about eating a big fat chicken. That's just the nafs. It's telling you, hey man, we're really, really hungry. We need something. Right? So sometimes when you have what you think are nightmares, it's actually the psychological wound is telling you, hey, pay attention to this. I need you to fix this. I need you to pay attention to this. Deal with this. And it will keep bringing it to you, until you deal with it. I'll give you a quick example. If you walk into a grocery store, say you're walking into a grocery store, and somebody runs up to you. He's got on a bright red jacket. He runs up to you, he pulls out the gun, big 357, puts the 357 in your face, and all you can see is the barrel, and you're thinking, oh, my life flashed before my eyes. And he says, give me your wallet, give me your phone, give me everything. Right? What happens is time slows down. It seems like time slows down when that happens. Right? Because everything that's happening is going into your long-term memory. It's making an imprint where it normally would not make an imprint. You know, kids, when they're running and falling and having problems, that pain that they experience by falling and stuff, that goes into their short-term memory. So when you pick them up and you say, oh, Muhammad, yeah, Ahmed, yeah, Fatima, it's going to be okay. That's processing. That pain is able to move quickly through the short-term memory. You don't want it to go to the long-term memory. Because if it goes into the long-term memory, it'll be with them their whole life until they get help for it. So what happens is, this guy runs up on you with a gun. You give him your wallet because you don't want to get shot. But every time you see somebody with a red jacket on, it could be your best friend, you have heart palpitations. Your heart starts racing and you don't know why. That's because that trauma that happened has not been processed. And every time you see somebody walking with a red jacket, it's going to remind you of the time you got robbed. And you can apply that to many different situations. All right? Now, I will end with this. My point with that was, people need help sometimes. People need help. They need professional help. How to process their emotions. How to move through certain dysfunctions. You know? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us wise counselors to be able to help with these type of things. I will end with this. In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, مَا أَصَابَ مِن مُصِيبَةٍ إِلَّا بِإِذْنِ اللَّهِ. There's no affliction that's going to afflict you except it's by the permission of Allah. So are people going to have trauma? Yes. Are people going to have a hard time? Yes. Yes. It's going to happen. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for whatever reason, He allows it. But then He tells you what you have to do. وَمَن يُؤْمِن بِاللَّهِ يَهْدِ قَلْبَهُ. Whoever sincerely believes in Allah, Allah will guide his heart. And one of my teachers explained. He said that, yes, you're going to go through things. You're going to have problems. All of these different things. But believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it begins with just having a good opinion about Allah. Just have a good opinion about Allah. Husna dhann billah. Just have a good opinion about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you have to make meaning out of your suffering. But sometimes you have to go get professional care to make meaning out of that suffering. All right? This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking us to do. And I'll tell you, as a social worker, I'm a licensed clinical social worker. As a social worker, I noticed this, that the best nonprofit organizations are started by people that have been through the worst life experiences. So for example, I know of a woman who lost her children to the system. Right? They took her children away unjustly. She was falsely accused of something. They took her children away. And after she went through 3 years to get her kids back and all of that suffering that she went through, she went and started a nonprofit. And now she has one of the best nonprofits in the country helping women to get their children back. She had to go through that to be able to fulfill her life mission. All of her pain is now purpose. And that is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. He wants you to turn your tragedy into triumph. All of your chaos into clarity. Your mess has to become the message. Right? Your tragedy has to become triumph. And all your misfortune has to turn into meaning. It has to. Allah expects us to move past the pain. Notice I didn't say don't get help, but we're supposed to get help and move past the pain. Otherwise, it will show up in the way we interact with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I'll end with this, I promise. I keep saying that, but I'm going to end with this. I had a case. A young lady came into my office at our headquarters. And she was trying to get herself back together, right? She was trying to learn to get back on practicing the deen. And so we began to just unpack, all her experiences and things like this. By this time, she was about to graduate from college. And she was basically saying that, when she was growing up, she was forced, right at the age of puberty, her parents made her wear the hijab, which is normal. But it was the stuff they were telling her what was going to happen to her if she didn't wear the hijab. Right? And all my daughters wear the hijab, so don't think that's where I'm going. I'm not, I'm just telling you the story. All right? So what ended up happening is that everything that her parents was telling her at a young age, she's not old enough to have a strong relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So her relationship with Allah is coming through the relationship with her parents. So all of the distortions that her parents were giving her, she projected onto Allah when she was 16 and 17. You see, this is how trauma can affect Iman. That's what happens. And so she had this distorted, the same attachment that she had to her parents, she began to have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is out to get me. If I don't do everything perfectly, if I don't do everything right, Allah is going to get me. And that just drove her to be like, listen, it's too much. I just have to just cut everything off. I got to cut off my parents. I got to just get away from religion. I have to, right? And then that drives her right into the hands of shaitan. So she begins to have all these different experiences and things like that. Where she begins to, her relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala became transactional. It wasn't based on love, loving Allah, understanding the compassion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so she slowly came back. But I just wanted to give you that so that you can understand, like, these are the pain points of our ummah. These are the things that's happening within our ummah that we have to do better. And I'll stop right there and see if anyone has any questions. Don't be bashful. You can ask me whatever you like. You guys are making this too easy. The ladies, no questions. Assalamu alaikum. I agree with you. We had a couple of suicides last year out where I stay at. I stay in the IE, right, in the Empire. Same thing, Muslim families. The kids, sometimes it's overdose, right? Sometimes it's just suicide. So what we have to do here is we have to deal with stigma, right? This shame. So let me ask you guys this. Was there any companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that committed suicide? How many people say no? Never committed suicide. You're wrong. You're wrong. There was a companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam who slit his wrist. And Jabir, the companion of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, told us that he slit his wrist because of the pain. He was wounded, and and then he slit his wrist, and so he died. And then one of the other companions saw him in a dream, and he looked good, but he had a bandage on his arm. Right? He had a bandage on his arm. And then he said, the companion asked him, "What did Allah do with you?" He said, "No, Allah has forgiven me." But he was told that Allah would not fix what he himself had destroyed, meaning the cut on his arm. Right? And then Rasulullah SAW made dua for him and said, may Allah forgive that also. See, these are the type of hadith that we don't tell people. We don't talk about this. Right? Like we're like on remote control. We don't go deep enough into the tradition to be able to normalize human imperfection. We pretend like, nobody's gonna make mistakes. When you will find in the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, every solution, you'll see that he dealt with every problem, or he indicated something that can help us in our time. But we need people to go deep into the tradition. So very quickly, I'll tell you this. What I would do with someone like that is, I would tell them this hadith first and foremost, right? I would tell them this hadith. The second thing that I would do is let them know, like there's a ruqsa there's a license, there's an exception in certain situations, right? So for example, let's just say that a woman is pregnant and she's getting ready to have a baby. There's no female doctors around. Can she be treated by a male doctor? Yes. So normally we hide our sins. We normally, like, we don't want to tell people about our sins. But when we need treatment, when we need to fix a problem, that's when we're supposed to tell those who can help us, look, this is what I'm dealing with. This is what my son is dealing with. This is what my daughter is dealing with. Under normal circumstances, yes, there's a sitter, right? You cover your sins. But when you have to solve a problem, and every faqih, he knows this. Everyone who studies fiqh, they know this, right? Like there's a time when there's an exception to the rule. There's an exception to the rule. And when people are suffering, there's an exception to the rule. But we have to normalize this imperfection so that people can come out with their problems without being stigmatized, without being shamed. We have a lot of work to do. That's one of the reasons why I'm here. We have a lot of work to do. And inshallah, like I'm gonna keep beating this drum because I meet with the families in private. I meet with the kids in private. I know what's going on. And it's like, no, things have to change. So I hope that answers your question. Anyone else? Yes. I can't hear you. What did he say? I can't hear you. I'm sorry, I can't hear him. I can't hear him. It's okay. It's okay. It's okay. Okay, if there's no more questions, I'm done. Oh, okay. Assalamu alaikum. No, no. This is an excellent question. This is an excellent question. Very, very important question. So throughout Islamic history, when a patient would seek help, like, say for example, if a person had pain and they couldn't make sajda, but they weren't sure if they had enough pain to be able to sit in the chair, then the faqih would tell him, go talk to a doctor that's mutaqi. They're mindful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? It's no different with therapists, okay? A therapist or a counselor, I would tell the patient, I would tell the client, don't just seek out someone who has professional training at the university, but they also have a strong understanding of the religion, right? Because I've seen Muslim counselors who mean well, but because they didn't take time to study the tradition, sometimes they prolong the pain of the person. I'll give you an example. I had a client who has OCD. All right, OCD. So he has obsessive compulsion thinking, especially around things about like wudu and salat and tahara, things like that. So he was seeing one therapist, Muslim therapist, but that Muslim therapist didn't have a good foundation in fiqh, understanding the Sharia. In our first meeting, when I listened to his condition, when I understood what his situation was, I began to tell him, because he was obsessive about filth. How much filth can, he didn't want any filth on his body. So he was being over meticulous about, did anything drop in my underwear? Did anything? And then when he would go make wudu, he'd be like, did I miss? It would take him 45 minutes just to make wudu, right? And we solved this problem with one session after he was with years with another therapist. And I just explained to him that there is a ruqsa for him. There's an allowance for him because of his condition. There's a certain amount of filth that's allowable for him because of his condition. And it changed immediately it changed his life. So I know firsthand, don't just get the professional training, you must learn Sharia. You must, right? And you can take classes, and within 8 months to a year, you'll have a working knowledge of the Sharia. You're not going to know all the answers, but you're going to know how to find it. You're going to learn how to research, right? And so mental health is, mental health is important, right? It's important. Number two, Muslim therapists, they need to learn the deen, right? They need to learn the deen. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And the client should, if they want the most bang for their buck, they should get someone who knows both. They understand the psyche of human beings. They understand human development, human behavior, and how to correct dysfunction. But they should also know how that looks from our spiritual perspective. What did Allah and His Messenger say about this? Right? Because the human being has 4 dimensions. He's biological. He has this body. He's psychological. He has these emotions and moods and attitudes and feelings and all of that, right? He's also social. Things happen with other people, and he's also spiritual. So you can't just give him these 3 things and don't give him the spiritual cure, right? Like we should all know that salawat ala nabi, to say Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barak ala Sayyidina Muhammad, Rasulullah SAW told us that it deals with ham, it deals with anxiety, it deals with it, right? And so this is just, yes, the client should seek out people who are knowledgeable in the deen and also knowledgeable about human behavior. So I hope that answers your question. Donna, you're welcome. Okay, I'm done. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant. Astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala mursaleen. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. All right. Jazakallah khairan. Ameen. Ameen.